robotics, uh, robotics, dynamics, control, bond draft, modeling, design, etc. His academic qualification, I'll be going through brief. He has done PhD in space robotics from IIT Kharagpur in 2005, MTech in solid mechanics and design from the IIT Kanpur, Delhi, Kanpur, 1998, BTech Mechanical Engineering from NIT Calicut in 1998. He is having rich experience of 32 years experience in industry for the 5 year as well, teaching experience of 27 years, and he is teaching IIT Roorkee from 1994, since 1994. He is reviewer of several journal of international reputes. He is member of several societies, including Robotics Society of India, and he has guided 18 PhD and 40 MTech scholar in field of robotics. He has completed several projects such as design and development of cable-driven parallel robot of automated construction and many more. He remained chairman of GATE 2018, which is very prestigious position. He has authored several chapters in the field of robotics, the several books. He is a visiting researcher at École Polytechnique Universitaire de Lille, uh, Polytech Lille, France. I welcome Dr. P.M. Pathak in this session and invite him to deliver his valuable talks on the today's topic. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mishra, for the nice introduction. And uh, I think this is my second lecture at your prestigious institute. I think few months before I was invited to deliver another lecture
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
probably in another course.
Mm.
Okay, great. I'll be happy to deliver the talk today, and I have planned for a presentation on bionic manipulators. Okay. There are few students who are working in our lab in this area, and I am supervising them currently. I'd like to discuss some basics because it's being very general audience. I've thought of putting some basic uh, uh, material, basic content, so that everybody can understand and appreciate that. So thank you, Professor Mishra, again. Uh, yeah, so can I share my screen?
Sir, please, you can share the screen. You're already co-host, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, your screen is visible now.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So today, as I said, I giving you some glimpses of the bionic manipulator basically, and I'll be talking about the modeling aspect of it and some of the work which we are doing that I'll be discussing. Now the question comprises what are the bionic manipulators basically. So basically we it's a replicating some of the features which the nature has. Okay, so here in this figure, you can see that there is a elephant trunk basically. Okay, and we know that the trunk has got a lot of capability to take the load. Okay, people have thought of designing a robotic device, okay, which is flexible like elephant trunk, and which can take a certain amount of load. So you can see the replication of this device over here. And replication here. So here is the end effector, and here this figure shows end effector with a ball being caught by the end effector. Okay, so these are the type of the bionic manipulator, and I'll be discussing this elephant trunk and a snake. Two examples I'll be talking about today. Fine. So before I proceed, I would like to acknowledge and thank many people who contributed to our activities. One of them has been Coroli, a PhD student at University of Lille, France. My colleague in University of Lille, Professor Marzuki, Vincent, PhD student, again University of Lille, Mulu, PhD student IIT Roorkee, Inderjit Singh, PhD student, University of Lille, and the Crystal, which is the name of the laboratory there in the France, and the Festo, Germany, DST India, and CNRS France, and Indo-French Center for Promotion of Advanced Research activities. In fact, DST India and CNRS France funded our part of our activity. Okay, here the content for my presentation, as I said, I'll be discussing some state of the art, then forward and kinematic kinematic model and its calibration, and then I'll be taking up other example on the snake robot, and I hope it will be interesting to you, and it will be giving some uh, thing to think about how these things are. Okay. So, as our perception has been, robot can be classified as either hard robot or soft robot on the basis of compliance of the underlying material. Okay, so whether it is hard or whether it is soft, that is decided based on the compliance. All right. So if we look at this classification basically, so you can see that the hard robot again can be is usually discrete. Okay, so it's a non-redundant as well as the redundant type. Non-redundant means basically yes. To introduce this concept to you, basically, I have to first define the degrees of freedom. When we are talking about robotics, actually, the first foremost thing that appears, that is the degrees of freedom. Okay, so yeah, it is actually the number of independent variables, basically uh, number of independent variables needed to specify, okay, the position and orientation, basically, okay, of the or needed to um, uh, specify the position and orientation of any object in space. I'm talking about the general degree of freedom. Okay, for example, say if I say that there is a object in space, right? So some object is there in space, and say if I want to specify this object in space, then naturally this specification can be with respect to a coordinate system. Okay, so we will have say XYZ a coordinate system, and with respect to this coordinate system I can specify say for the position I can specify the CG of this object. Okay, so I have three uh, variables XCG, YCG, and ZCG, and I also need to specify the orientation. Okay, so to specify the orientation, I can have some coordinate system over here, local coordinate system, and I can tell how these axes are oriented with respect to the axis of my absolute frame. Okay, so to if I want to specify this object which is there in space, I need to have the 6 coordinate independent coordinates to specify, and so this is what is called that it is having a 6 degree of freedom. Now, when we are talking about robotics, if we want to say the general notion of robotics is that I want to place an object in any desired position and in any desired orientation, right? So I also need my robot to have a capability which can place the object in any desired position and desired orientation. Okay, so if I have I want the object to have a 6 degree of freedom, okay, my robot should also have the 6 degree of freedom, then only I can give the object a 6 degree of freedom. Okay, this is the concept, and if your degrees of freedom in the robot are more than 6, then what we call it as the redundant robot, and if the degrees of freedom are less than 6, then that is what is called as a non-redundant robot. So this is the definition, and yes. Then we may have the hyper redundant robot. That is, redundancy is very large. Okay, so in the hyper redundant robot, we have a subgroup called continuum robot, and in continuum again we have a subgroup which we call it as the soft robot. So this figure actually will give you a little more idea. Suppose I have got a robot just with 2 of links. Okay, I have a motor attached here to drive this link, and I have a motor attached here to drive this link. So I have a 2-link manipulator. All right. Now you see that when I actuate these joints, so these may be the trajectories which you are seeing. Okay, so these may be the possible positions. Now what I do is that, say, I increase the number of links. All right. So this is my first link, second link, third link, fourth link, and this is my fifth link. All right, so I have increased the number of joints. So you can see that its motion or motion of the robot has been like that as of a serpentine. Okay, and if I increase the number of links to a very large value, then you can see that the shape which robot gets, it's something like the continuum robot. So this is how by increasing the number of links, the things evolve, or we move from discrete to the continuum domain. So a soft robot is inherently compliant, basically, okay, and exhibit large strain in normal operation. The most commonly used hard robots are kinematically non-redundant, as I explained to you. And these robots are typically used in well-defined environment in which they repeatedly perform the prescribed motion. You might have seen the robots in the workshop, in the industries, and they have been used. Now, these hard robots, when we are talking about, they are designed such that they have a very large stiffness. Actually, you see that if its stiffness is large, the deflection is going to be low. And if you want things to be accurate, okay, the trajectory tracking of your manipulator to be accurate, you want very lesser amount of deflection in the arm of the manipulator. Okay, so hard robots are designed to be stiff so that vibration and deformation of the structure and the drivetrain do not reduce the accuracy of the movement. And as I said, the hard robots are hyper redundant when the number of joints are very large, and hyper redundant robots have potential to be work in unstructured environment and provide high dexterity. You may say that why do we require a hard robot? Okay, as I said, suppose you have some obstructions, basically, okay, something like this. So if you have a hard robot, then the hard robot can overcome these obstructions, basically. So if you have the more number of links, then the configuration of robots is possible, so that these obstructions can be avoided. So this is the usage of the large number of links. So I'll just explain a very simple, with the help of very simple figure, the capabilities of hard and soft robot. Okay. For the hard robot, if you see at this figure, you have an obstacle, say here. So as I was telling you in the previous slide, now if I want my manipulator to say go over there, it's a tip to reach over there, then you see that it can go in this form. That is, this could be a joint angle, this could be another joint angle, and this could be the another joint angle which the motor rotates to these links. Okay, now here the probability of hitting of this obstacle with the robot is very large. Okay, but if you have a soft manipulator, then you can say that the soft manipulator can take a deformation, okay, such that, or it's easy for it to take deform in such a way that it is not hitting the obstacle. So that is the advantage the soft robot may have. So this provides a better dexterity um, to the soft robot. Okay. However, there are problems also, as I said. So what are the problems? Problem is in the measurement, basically. We engineers face problem in measuring. It's working very well over here. That is fine. So we are able to increase its dexterity. But the question is that if I want to measure this tip position, okay, so you see that the tip position can be easily measured in case of the hard robot if I know these joint angles, say this theta 1, theta 2, theta 3. If I know, and if this is a simple planar manipulator, then I can just write x is equal to cos theta L1 cos theta 1 plus L2 cos theta 1 plus theta 2 plus L3 cos theta 1 plus theta 2 plus theta 3. So I get the x coordinate. Likewise, I can calculate y and z coordinate. But in case of soft robot, how do I calculate this x, y, and z coordinate? That is a problem because I don't have joints here. Okay, I don't have joints here. So calculation of this XYZ is a problem, and how this is done, maybe I'll be talking to you a little later. Maybe we could measure this arc length basically. Okay, and this with this arc length and with the angle which is being included here, so we can have some measurement and then we can have some transformation from this to x, y, z. That is possible. Okay, so people are trying to, or people have worked on it rather with certain assumptions, which we, what we call it as the constant curvature assumptions. That is, we assume that it's a constant curvature and then they do it. Okay, so position sensing is a problem. Now, manipulation, if we come across, okay, so manipulation is easier this way. I think, as I was telling you, manipulation is easier, and we can have some payload also as compared to, sorry, as compared to the rigid manipulator. The other problem is that of loading. Now, in case of hard manipulator, if there is a payload which is being taken by the end effector, what you are going to have, there is going to be certain amount of displacement, okay, in the manipulator. Okay, so your manipulator links may be moving from here to say this value, this configuration because of the load here. But in case of soft manipulator, this displacement is going to be a large. Okay, so basically, as I said, in case of hard, we have stiffness very high, okay, and in case of soft, stiffness is low. So we are compromising on the stiffness. So here the accuracy is high, whereas here accuracy suffers basically. Okay, so that is the trade-off which is being done. Fine, I think, yeah, I have explained these things. So uh, I can skip these slides. Okay, so soft robots have distributed deformation with theoretically an infinite number of degrees of freedom. Okay, that is there with the soft robot because their deformation is distributed. So each point, it's made of now infinite number of points if I am talking about theoretically, and to describe those infinite number of points you need infinite coordinates basically. Okay, so its degrees of freedom is theoretically it's infinite. Okay, so this leads to the hyper redundant configuration space where the robot tip can attain every point in the three-dimensional workspace with an infinite number of robot shape and configuration. Okay, yeah. Then the question arises: why do we go for the soft robots if it is not having the good accuracy. Okay, so soft robot has got actually a additional feature, that is they generate little resistance to compressive forces, and therefore what happens that they can conform to obstacle. Conform to obstacle means that if some obstacle is there, it can take its shape, basically it can deform. Okay, that is possible. The advantage of that is that they can carry soft and fragile payloads without causing damage to it. The actuators of soft robots are typically integrated into and distributed throughout the structure. In case of hard robots, our actuators are actuated at the joints. We have the motors which are fixed at the joint to actuate these joints, basically. But in case of soft robots, okay, these soft robots are usually pneumatically actuated. Okay, all right. So the actuation is distributed in that case. Okay, often the actuators make up most of the structure. Soft robots fall into class of system that is termed as under-actuated because unlike hard robots, there is not an actuator for every degrees of freedom. Okay, and other degrees of freedom may be influenced by the actuators, but many degrees of freedom are not controllable over here. And sensing and controlling the shape of soft robot are challenging, as I explained to you earlier. And their structure is a continuum, so exact measurement of shape and tip position is difficult. Now, assuming a rigid robot, joint position can be processed by the forward kinematics. Okay, I hope all of you may be aware of uh, what is forward kinematics and what is inverse kinematic. So, if I have got a simple, say, 2 degree of freedom planar manipulator, say something like this, one link. So you have a motor here which is fixed to the ground, and it is actuating the first link, and then you have a motor which is fixed on the first link here, and it is actuating your second link. Okay, say if this angle is theta1 and this angle is theta2, and this is your tip of the manipulator, then I can find out this tip position. Okay, given the joint angles, this one. So as I was telling you, I can find out this angle is theta1. If this length is L1, this length is L2, then this total angle is going to be theta1 plus theta2, because these if I draw a parallel line here, so this angle will also be theta1 as this one. So the x and y tip, x tip, y tip here. Okay, so x tip I can find out as L1 cos theta1 plus L2 cos theta1 plus theta2, and y tip I can find out as L1 sin theta1 plus L2 sin theta1 plus theta2. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the forward kinematics is that if suppose if you know the theta1 and theta2 value, okay, then you can find out x tip and y tip. Okay, so this is what is called as the forward kinematics. That is for the given joint configuration. Okay, we can get the tip positions. All right, and what is the inverse kinematics? Inverse kinematics is that you are given the x and y. Okay, now the question is that you may ask in forward kinematics, how do I know the theta1 and theta2? Okay, so to know the theta1 and theta2, if you are using your simple toy motors, okay, then they have a sensor called the potentiometer put into it. So with the help of the potentiometer rotation, you can find out what is that joint angle. And if you go for the little costlier motors, then you have what we call it as the encoders, which is attached to the motor. So from there you can find out these joint angle. So this is how we get the X tip and Y tip. This is called forward kinematics. Now the inverse kinematic is that if you are given say X tip, Y tip. Now you may ask, how do I know the X tip and Y tip? Okay, so because it's there in the workspace. Okay, it's there in the environment. So for that you may have say a camera placed here at the corner of the room where your robot is there. Okay, and with the help of robot, with the help of the camera, you can locate, you can calibrate your camera, and you can locate where your X tip and Y tip is. Okay, so if we know X tip and Y tip, I may be interested in finding out what are these joint angles. Okay, so I have two equations with two unknowns. I can find out these joint angles, and this is what is called as the inverse kinematic problem. Okay, so that is there. So inverse kinematic problem can be used to determine the joint position that provide the desired tip position. So we can have that. Now, joint position measured by encoders, as I said, are compared with the desired position calculated from the inverse kinematics, and actuator then servos the error. Here, basically, I'm talking about the control, how the joints are controlled, basically. So the error is found out, and then a control action, a feedback control action is applied in order to have the precise joint tracking. Now, soft robot interacts with the environment differently from the hard component. Gravity and contact loading basically cause continuous deformation in the soft robot that may not be observable or controllable from the limited sensor or actuators respectively. And further, the soft robots can locomote by using a variety of gates, as I'll be explaining you in case of the snake robot, that the soft robot can locomote by using variety of gates with a large portion of their structure in ground contact at any instant of time. So this is the example basically. So of the soft actuator, this is the elephant trunk, which I talked about in my very first slide, or about this could be the tongue of say the dog. And here also you can see that how well its shape has been taken, and it has been actuated actually basically. Okay, so this is the soft actuator, this is the soft actuator. So these are the some of the examples from the nature about the soft actuator. Okay, so with this brief introduction, I'd like to give you some overview about how people have done it, how people have progressed in this area, okay, of the bionic manipulator, and how they have tried to model the kinematics of its mathematically. Okay. So basically, here things are like this. Okay. If we take about if we talk about say biological grasping, basically, So suppose I want to grasp an object, something like this. So first I need to have understanding of biological grasping. Okay. So with this understanding, I carry out the mechanical analysis of biological grasping at the biological level. Okay. After that, we apply the concept of physics and maths, and so we try to model the grasping task with the help of a gripper. Could be designed something like this, which could deform, and you can see that this mechanical biological grasping we are able to replicate with the research in bionic field, not exactly duplicating that, but somehow replicating the entire grasping process. Okay, this is how it is done. So there are several application domains of the humanoids. Okay, you can see the bird, basically bionic bird. Okay, you must have seen in the movie Uri. The use of its use had been demonstrated, but there are many people who are working in this particular area currently in the bionic world. So the several application domains are humanoids, animal-like robot, explore the unknown planet, task in hazardous environment, home robot, toys, artistic robots, and so on. This is the basically the muscles replicating the muscle basically, and here you can see that these are the bionic actuators which have been used to replicate the human muscle. So the state of the art could be based on the degree of mobility, degree of steerability, degree of maneuverability, and degrees of freedom and redundancy. That is redundancy and hyper redundancy. So first of all, let us look at the terrestrial mobile robots. Okay, so the terrestrial mobile robots could be classified as the wheel mobile robot we all are aware about, and these wheel mobile robot could be of say rolling type. Okay, where you have the omnidirectional wheels put on the robot. Okay, or it could be tracking type. Okay, basically having the tank like of a structure. Okay, so this is there. Then we know about the legged robot also. Okay, where they could be either walking robot which walks, or they could be about running robots, that is the one which runs, or they could be the jumping robot. So all these three types of legged robots are possible. Okay, and then comes the classification of the continuum robot, which I was talking to you. That is the one with snake-like undulations, as you can see here. Okay, so these are the three types of the terrestrial mobile robots. Then the spatial manipulator robots, if we look at here, then in case of spatial manipulator robots, as I was telling you, we have the elephant trunk. Then there is another one, air octar is there, and then broomy is there, and then the wire-driven serpentine robots are there. So the elephant trunk and air octa, they are of continuous shape, whereas the people have worked on the discrete shape also, say wire-driven one, and these are again a serpentine structure, and these are the hard robot with soft capabilities. Okay, so and if we look at actuation purpose, they are hybrid, cable driven and pneumatic. This is also hybrid, cable driven and pneumatic, and this is intrinsic electrical one, intrinsic cable driven, and these are the degrees of freedom, these are the number of sections, and these are the applications. So this is used for grasping, and others are still in the research phase. Then continuing with that, there are various other developments. We have the concentric tubes, basically, that is one tube inside the other one. That is there. Then there is one Colobot robot, again continuous soft. Then you have the octopus, continuous soft, and the bionic handling assistant BHA from the Festo, and this is again continuous and soft robot. This octopus is used for the underwater application. These two applications areas are surgery, and this is still in the research phase. So we have seen the manipulator example, we have seen the mobile example. So if we combine both of them, then what we get as the mobile manipulator example. Okay, that is, apart from the base motion, you have the manipulator also. So if you look at industrial robotics, then we have many example. For example, KUKA KR5 or KR6 here, where this manipulator base can move along a slider. Okay, and so there is a motion or mobility to the base, and the manipulator can have a motion. Okay, or we could have the pathfinder here, or agriculture robot is also there. Large scale pipe manipulation is there. Robots which is used in construction, hazardous application, and the rescue robot. So you have basically, as I said, mobile base, and you have a manipulator mounted on that. So here, as we have been talking about the continuous manipulator, so you can have the arm, the continuous arm on the mobile base. This is octo arm. Then you could have this continuous manipulator on the mobile base, which is there in the Robotino XT, continuous soft one. I'm going to talk about this example. And then you have OC robotics, this one, the discrete hard one, and elephant trunk like robot, discrete hard again. So coming to the modeling method, now the question arises, how do we model these robots? Okay, the soft robots. And why do we want to model? We want to model because we want to predict the behavior of the robots in different conditions. Okay, there are different modeling methods. So approach of constant curvature robot was given by Webster and Jones, and many people worked on the different aspect of it. One is the modified DS, that is the Denevitt Hartenberg robot, Denevitt Hartenberg notation. So those who may be having even little background of the robotics, they may be aware of this DS notation. Basically, It's a way of representing the joint angle, joint parameters rather. Okay, and that is what we call it as the DS notation. Okay, joint parameter and the link parameter basically. Okay, so there are four parameters. So in the modified DS, what they did is that they tried to apply the concept of a hard robot to the soft robot. Okay, so naturally they cannot apply the DS parameter concept directly into it, because these are the soft robots, not the hard one. So they modified those DS parameters, and in that category there are various work by, say, Hanna and Walker, Jones and Walker, to work on the air octa as well as the oct arm. Then exact geometric model, there is a work by Iqbal, and this is our work basically by the Corali, which she did. Then other work could be the curve parameterization could be there, and exponential coordinate could be, these are could be the other example, other way of analyzing it. So now let us look at the bionic manipulator Robotino XT. So you have, which I'm going to talk about. So this is my mobile base, this one, and this is my arm, manipulator arm basically. So this is the soft manipulator, and in this one, let me tell you about construction of it. There are two sections in each pipe basically. Okay, so here there is a rigid joint, not rigid joint, there is a rigid separation. So this is the first part, this is the second part, and here there are three tubes, say tube 1, 2, 3, and here these are three tubes 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then to orient this also, there are here the two tubes, one here and another here, so that it can rotate it, and this is the gripper. So this is how this robot looks like. So little demo for you for this. Okay, so this is how okay, I think I'll skip. So this is how its internal construction looks like basically. So here you are seeing these are the basically the servo walls basically. Okay, so here there is a compressor in this one. Okay, and there are compressed air comes through these servo walls, and basically there are tubings you are able to see, some of the tubing you are able to see. So the different sections are actuated with the help of these tubings, basically, or pneumatic through pneumatic pressure, and you can see some very thin wire which has been put here, and these wires are nothing but the linear potentiometers, basically, which could be used to measure the length of these sections, basically. So that could be done, and this is your wheel for the motion of the omnidirectional wheel for the motion of the mobile base. So if you want to look at the internal structure, this is how it is for you to understand it better. Yeah, so these are the three motors, basically, 1, 2, 3 here. And these motor actuate the wheels. Yeah, this is piezo walls. Yeah, this is how the internal structure looks like, basically. So when you actuate, okay, the air actuation is there. This is how the rotary actuator for orienting the end effector. And this is the compliant gripper. You can see that it can grasp the object very nicely. Okay. So the question is that here, what will be the forward kinematics if I look at it? Okay. So if when I'm pneumatically actuating the different sections, length is going to change, basically. Okay. So this section length and this section length is going to be changed. So if I could measure these lengths, basically, okay, then maybe I'll be able to get the tip position of the manipulator. Okay, so that is that. So let me just give the description. As I said, I think I have explained this. This robot which I talked about, it is called Robotino XT, and this is put on the mobile platform. The mobile platform name is Robotino. It's a product of Festo, Germany, basically. They are pioneer in the bionic manipulators, various type of bionic manipulators they have been making. So it's a hyper redundant continuous continuum robot, which is called Compact Bionic Handling Assistance, CBHA. There are two sections with 3 tube per sections that I told you. One rotation part and one compliant gripper. It's a pneumatic actuation. There is limited extension. The backbone, actually, we assume that there is a very limited extension in the backbone. Okay, so most of the workspace comes from the deformation in the tubes. So there is limited extension. The trunk is a succession of polyamide-based backbones, basically, where their deformations depend on the material flexibility. So these could be the assumptions. First, that the curvature of the tube is a perfect arc of circle. Okay, so I talked about these assumptions to you earlier also, that we assume that these curvature of tubes are perfect arc of circles, basically. And the form of trunk is modeled as a 2-cylinder with diameter of their base. So here, although you can see that these diameters are changing, it appears that it's a part of frustum of the cone. But to simplify the analysis, we assume that these are cylinders. We may assume it's a frustum of cone also, but again, the analysis will be complicated. So, and the tubes are assumed to be parallel, and the mobility of the rotation has not been taken into the consideration. So in this one, we have not considered the rotation degrees of freedom at the end effector. So this is at the result of that assumptions, as I was saying. So we can assume that this is of diameter D1, this is of diameter D2, okay, like this. And these are the length of the tubes, basically. You can see L1, this is one which is there in the back, not seen here. That length is L2, this is L3, L4, and again the one which is there in back, that is L5, and this is L6. So these are the length, and experimentally, so these lengths are synonyms to the joints, basically the joint angles, which we talked about in case of the rigid manipulator. Okay, so the forward kinematic model is basically that we are interested in finding out where my tip goes. Okay, that is the finding out the tip position here. Okay, so what we do, we assign various frames. Say at the origin of the first section, we have a coordinate system here. At the origin of the beginning of the second section, I have got a coordinate system. At the beginning of the this rotary section, I've got a coordinate system like this. And then I have got origin for this one, a coordinate system here. Now we can do the transformation from one coordinate system to the another to reach to the top. Okay, but as I said, there is a problem here because uh, our tubes are they can deform, basically. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the forward kinematics is that the turbulence, basically, are the joint variables synonymous to the rigid manipulator. And for given these turbulence, you may ask, how do we measure these turbulence? So these are, as I said, these are the linear potentiometers. So I can have these values of the turbulence. Okay, so the forward kinematics model is that for given these turbulence, I want the pose, that is the end effector position, that is its xyz coordinate, and its orientation, that is phi, theta, and psi. Okay, so the its orientation and its position I want to calculate for given the tube length. So this is my normal forward kinematics problem, and this we call these values as the tube space. And here, naturally, when I'm talking about the tip position and orientation, we call it as the workspace. Okay, now this job is done with a little different way. So what we do, that we find out a specific transformation, that is from the for the given tube length, we find out the arc parameter. As I said, we assume these tube to be deformed in the form of the shape of the arc, arc of the circle. Okay, so we find out the arc parameters. And what are these arc parameters? These are the radius of the arc, and include an angle of the arc, and the orientation of the arc. So basically, okay, so for the two sections, we have the these 6 parameters, the arc parameter. And once I have got the arc parameter, then I can do a transformation to get the these xy z position, as well as the orientation of the end effector. So let me call this as a specific transformation, and this as the independent transformation here. Okay, so as I said, we assume that the curvature of the tube is perfect arc of circle centered at this value R00. This assumption is considered when there is no load. Remember, if there is a load at the end effector, then we cannot consider the tube to be deforming in the shape of the perfect arc of circle. Okay. This assumption is considered when there is no load on the gripper, gravity effect is neglected, and tubes are parallel and their diameters are constant. So see, we are making these many assumptions in order to simplify our analysis. And with these assumptions, if I do that, then I have a simple equation. You may be knowing S is equal to R theta, that is the arc length is equal to radius of the radius of the arc, radius of curvature of the arc, as well as the included angle. So this gives you the arc length basically. Okay, so using this equation I can get get my theta basically. Okay, so I can get this k value, that is this is my arc length. So reverse of arc will be giving me my curvature, and once I know the curvature and I know the arc length, I can get the included angle over here. Okay, so here Rj is the radius of curvature of the section, theta j is the curvature angle of the section, and Lj is the arc length of the section. Okay, and when the differential pressures are applied to the tubes of a section, this causes a deformation on the tube, and thus no longer remains parallel. So coming to the forward kinematic model, as I said, basically, what we have to do, we have to, what I'm interested in, that I am interested in finding out this four transformation from 4 to origin basically. So this 4 to origin transformation can be given by this transformation matrix multiplication. So I'm sorry for this, you need to have some previous background of robotics. I hope, do you have this background? Anyone?
Most of the people are new only, sir.
Okay. Okay. Basically, this transformation matrix actually is something like this. It's a 4 by 4 matrix. Okay. It's a 4 by 4 matrix. The last row is 0, 0, 0, 1. And here you have the position variable, basically the px, py, pz. And here the 3 by 3 matrix here is basically the matrix that represents the orientation. Okay, this is this whole 4 by 4 matrix is what is called as the transformation matrix. Okay, so basically, if I'm talking about transformation from 4 to 3, 4 with respect to 3, basically, so 4 with respect to 3. So here, what does this means? That how the position of the 4 is there with respect to 3, that can be represented by these three position, these three elements, and how the 4 is oriented with respect to 3, that is represented by these 9 elements basically. Okay, and this is actually what is called as the orientation matrix, and this is the position vector. Now you may say that what is the orientation matrix basically? Okay, so as I was telling you, if I have to say, if I have something, an object, something like this, okay, and I want to represent the orientation of this with respect to, say, another reference coordinate or frame, which we call it. So what we have to do? So what we have to do that, I have to resolve these vector. Okay, first I have to resolve this in this direction, resolve it in this direction, resolve it in this direction. Okay, and similarly I have to resolve this one in this direction, this direction, this direction, and resolve this one in this direction, this direction, this direction. So that way I can get the orientation basically. Okay, so when I'm resolving this in this direction, if I assume it's a unit vector, then it will be simply the cos theta. All right, it will be simply the cos theta. So that way it gives the orientation. All right, so you have the orientation here, you have the position here. So what I'm saying here is that I want to measure this 4 with respect to origin. Okay, so what I do that I have 4 with respect to 3, then I have got 3 with respect to 2, I have got 2 with respect to 1, and I have got 1 with respect to 0 here, and then I have 0 with respect to origin here. So this way I can transform from here to here. Okay, so here these two, that is 1 to 0 and 0 to origin, will look like this if I do the transformation which I just discussed with you. So this one is representing the position vector and this one is representing the orientation vector. And then we have the independent transformation, okay, that is from arc parameter to position and orientation. Okay, so arc parameter to position and orientation, if I want to make, so let me have, say, this is my x, y is out of plane of paper, and this is z, this is, say, arc length, this is included angle theta. Okay, then you see I can write what is my this position in the Cartesian space. Okay, you see this length is complete is r here, and this is also radius, so this length is going to be r cos theta. So if I subtract r minus r cos theta, I'll be getting the x coordinate here. So r minus r cos theta, this is my x coordinate. It is in this plane, so its y is going to be 0. And what is the z coordinate? It is this distance basically. So this is going to be r sine theta. Okay, so this way from the radius of the arc and the included angle theta, I can get the Cartesian vector, Cartesian position x, y, z. Okay, and suppose this arc I rotate about z axis by say this angle phi, then this rz phi I can write. Okay, this is the rotation matrix for rotation about z axis. Okay, so this I can write it like this. Okay, and if I have rotation about y by theta, then my matrix, this is my matrix is going to be, okay, so the transformation matrix will be this matrix, that is rotation about z, and this is rotation of about y, and this p value, where this is your p basically. So this way I can multiply those and I get this as the transformation matrix. Okay, and this is the independent transformation, that is R parameter to the position and orientation, and I want to orient the end effector same as that of the initial value I want to take as the base. So some transformation further can be carried out, and that will be giving me this value. So the forward kinematics is from arc parameter to position and orientation. Okay, then for the two sections, actually this equation I can write for the two sections. Basically this is say for section 1 and this is for section 2. So I can write these two equations for the two sections, and this is how tip position for x1 y1 z1, and this is for x2 y2 z2 could be there. Okay, here I was saying that this I have defined earlier, and these two I have uh, worked out just now, and this one with the p displacement can be just given like this. So I have this transformation, that is from arc parameter to the tip I have. Then next comes the tube length to the arc parameter, specific transformation. Okay, here again you see that I have one tube here, I have second tube here, I have third tube here. Okay, and these tubes have say arc length r1, say at center it is r, and these are the locations, say this r, the center backbone is at an angle phi, and these tubes are at an angle further phi 1, phi 2, and phi 3. Okay, then again I can carry out these simplifications equations, that is ri is equal to r minus d cos phi, and this is for the length where this length is summation of all average of the all the three potentiometer readings basically. Okay, so this way I can do this simplifications. So basically what with this simplification I can get the values of the arc parameter basically. Okay, so here the arc parameters are basically the reverse of this radius of curvature of arc. Okay, this k value, and this is that angle. Okay, included angle. So for given these potentiometer readings I can find out k and phi value. So for the two different sections I can have phi 1 theta 1 and r1. So this is for first sections, and I can have phi 2 theta 2 and r2. Okay, this is for the second section. So basically what I have done is that for the given tube lengths I have found out what are my arc parameters basically. Okay, so from tube lengths I have the arc parameter, and from arc parameter to Cartesian coordinate we have already found out. So that way we can complete the complete forward kinematic model of this one. Okay, so for the tube lengths we find out the arc parameter, and from arc parameter we can find out the pose. So this way we can try to work on the forward kinematic model for the continuous manipulator. So I'll be making moving a little fast here. For this one, these are the various parameters. Some of the parameters we took from the catalog of the manufacturer, and some of the parameters were measured basically. And then we had the 4 sets of reading basically. And as I said, these are the potentiometer readings basically. So potentiometer reading, 4 sets of reading we had. And then here, yeah, I have already explained to you these potentiometers basically for the different sections. And yes, then what we did is that we put the 2 cameras basically in order to find out the XYZ tip position over here. Okay, so with the help of 2 cameras, we tried to find out that. And then we plotted the simulated tip trajectory and the experimental tip trajectory over here. So this simulated is one from the kinematic model, which I have discussed with you. And these are the experimental values which we got from the camera reading. Then other, to make the things precise, what we did is that the tip of the robot, we attached a KUKA KR5 robot, because ultimately if you take camera reading, then you have to process those camera data um, in order to get camera images in order to get the XYZ coordinate. Okay, so XYZ, other way of the getting the XYZ coordinate could be that you have a robot, and robot and effector position, you can get it easily. Okay, so that value could be taken, and then the various transformation could be obtained. So this is how these things could be done. And then of course various calibration was done, and the values were calculated and plotted. So you can see the XYZ, the tip values here, model before calibration, model after calibration, and position from the KUKA. So then we have the error plots. All these things could be done. These are the orientation plots. These are error in orientations. These could be there, and these are the position plots. Okay, so these things are there. And then the inverse kinematic model, yeah, so whatever I discussed till now, it was only about the forward kinematic model. We can have the inverse kinematic model, which I said that if I'm given the XYZ coordinate, then I can find out what are my potential, what my potentiometer readings are going to be. Okay, so here there are many sources of error. The curvature form of the trunk is different to a perfect arc of circle. Okay, so this is the source of error. The form of trunk is actually a cone and not a cylinder. I discussed this with you. For our simplification only, we assume it to be a cylinder. The characteristic of polyamide material of the robot is not very well known. Pneumatic actuators are not known to have not accurate in positioning tasks, and variables of configuration space are coupled. Extension gives a larger workspace. Extension, we have assumed that it is not there, but although there is going to be some extension, so that is going to be the problem. Then we did some work on the cooperative behavior of 2 such manipulators handling a common object, as you can see over here. So the cooperative behavior has been discussed. And so this way, although it's a very simple task, just bringing it down and taking it up. Yeah, then it's a Modeling for the cooperative behavior for the planner case. I'll not explain much into detail of this. Yeah. So this is the initial configuration basically. So you have the first robot here, you have the second robot here, and here you have the object. So some simulation results. Then the other type of bionic manipulator which I want to quickly go through is that of the hyper redundant snake robot. We did some work, and also we are continuously doing it. And this work is part of a project which we are doing with Korea. Here, you know that the snake moves in different ways. These ways we call it as gates, and these gates could be a serpentine one, or concertina one, or side winding, or rectilinear progression, or combination of serpentine and caterpillar. Okay, so these robot we made some initial work with the help of the Fatuba motor. It was done. So you can see these are the various gates. This is concertia, and this is the serpentine. This is the side winding, and this is the caterpillar motion. So this is how the side winding motion takes place. The snake finds few resistance point in the environment, and snake may use variation of serpentine motion to get around, and they contact their muscles and flinches their body side winding to create a S shape basically, that has only two ground points of contact with the ground. When they push off, they move laterally. So this is how it is done. Then this is the side winding one. Here you can see that uh, it's progress like the side rolling of the screw. That way it progresses. And then you have the caterpillar one. So this is another gate, the rectilinear or caterpillar one. Okay, and yes, and concertia is another one where it extends its head and the front of the body along the vertical surface, and then finds a place to grip with its ventral scales. So we try to replicate these gates. One is, this is the lateral undulation, this is the side winding, and this is the caterpillar motion. Then of late, we are working on the soft part of it, making a soft robot. Okay, so we have prepared a dynamic model of it, a bond graph based dynamic model for the soft snake robot, and we have simulated and animated it. So I think with this, I'd like to wind up my lecture, and I thank you all for listening me patiently. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Uh, Thank you, Pathak, sir. It was indeed very good information about this bionic robotics. Any Any query from anyone, please? You can write the query in the chat box also. Sir will be replying you. I think no query from anyone, sir. Might be very new topic to them, sir. This what you discussed today. It was really very new. I also attended full. I could see all full slides. It was highly
Yeah,
comprehensive.
actually, I was not aware that the participants is not having the previous background. Otherwise, I would have given some basic lecture on this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Basically, yeah. These are the people who are pursuing PhD or MTech students. So might not be much conversant about this robotics. And moreover, sir, this kind of this lab lab facility are not available easily everywhere. But still, we have this robotic lab, but presence of such kind of facility is not very common.
Mr. Sachin Adwaria want to say something. Yes, Sachin, you
Ah,
can unmute or ask.
Sachin, please.
Mr.
Good,
Sachin,
good, yes, sir. Good morning, sir. First of all, sir, I thank you so much for organizing this wonderful session. So my question is my voice is audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
yes,
Very
it's
good.
audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, as you mentioned in your project in your presentation that you are working on biomechanics on how the snake movement and how the snake uh, move. So, can you just explain me about how you collect the data, how you acquire the data from a natural body? Means how the motion is really and how to replicate that motion. So can you just tell me about the how you acquire the data about the motions?
You mean experimental data or simulated data?
Means you means because let's take an example of snake. So you observe the snakes very well and how the snake move, and you have mentioned there are only two points of the contact. So how you acquire the data? So what are the location? If the snake length is this, and the geometry of snake while it's moving, it should be like this only. So how you acquire data from a natural body? Because you cannot implement any sensor on them. So I just want to ask how you acquire those motion, the tragedy part or the that part of that or that motion.
Yeah, the gate which I described about snake, that has been taken from the literature actually. Okay, so the people have studied the various type of motions of the snake, and from there they have done it. Okay, if you want to ask about the simulated one, so for the simulated one, we have given the various type of trajectories for the snake motion to be followed for the joints. And for experimental one, yes, here, as I said earlier, if you are using in a hyper redundant fashion, then you can get the joint angles only. Okay, so you can get the joint angle, and for the joint space and for the Cartesian space, one can use the camera or any other vision type of devices in order to get the or capture the data. I hope I have answered your question.
Actually, sir, I want to ask to how the people acquire the data from nature. from a real snake, from snake, how the people acquire the data?
Naturally, they must have acquired through camera only. They capture the videos and then they analyze the videos how the different way the snakes are moving.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So any more question? No question. So, okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mishra, and thank you for to your team for organizing this event. It went on seamlessly, and yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Namaskar, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Russell, for joining and coordinating this session. I request all participants to please join at 12 p.m. sharp for the next session. And one more important announcement, which I have already done in the WhatsApp group, that today's third session, which is valedictory session, which will start at 2:30 p.m. And in the same valedictory session, Zoom chat box, there will be a test of this program followed by the feedback session. So for the participation certification, it is mandatory to join and participate in the test. So I hope everyone will consider this as a very serious task and will join all the remaining session. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir, again.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.